the Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause the Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, the poor Dan Hayes edition.
Just in general?
Well, because he got deserted. Absolutely deserted on the biggest day of the off-season so far.
Wow, that's not so. Yeah.
I'm John Bonus of TwinsDaily.com. With me, Aaron Gleeman of TheAthletic.com. And as we predicted last week, we got a fair amount to talk about.
Yeah. I'm happy that
we had a busy off-season day early on in November. That doesn't happen very often with the Twins.
Yeah.
Anymore.
I went to, like John just hinted at, I went to Vegas for the weekend. Just got home last night. It's Monday morning that we're talking about this. How devoted am I to this podcast that I come back from Vegas?
Right.
Not that devoted. I just wake up early.
Not so devoted that you actually brought, that we did any podcast from Vegas.
No, I brought the microphone.
We did not do an emergency podcast on
that got a bad
Saturday
look, by
morning.
the way. When I was unpacking, we get to the Bellagio and I'm unpacking. She goes, "Is that the microphone?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "You're doing a podcast?" And I go, "Well, if something happens." She's like, "Ugh." I don't know why. I think that's a girlfriend wife thing.
Yeah.
To be like, "Oh, you're not 100% focused on the next 4 days."
Yeah. Right, yeah.
It's like, okay, we didn't end up using it. Well, first you went to the fashion show, the unveiling at the Mall of America, which I missed.
That's Friday morning.
No
athletic people there. No Aaron. No Dan Hayes.
Chicago.
Yeah. Although you guys Dan did a nice story on it.
Yeah, he had I would argue, the best and fastest story on it with because he had talked to people beforehand and all that.
Right.
Because we knew it was coming. Dan's good at that, planning ahead, like a professional, not me. I leave. They do the fashion unveiling, 2 big non-tender decisions and a trade, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm in line at Cirque du Soleil. I don't know. What do you guys want to do with this?"
I thought about that, and then I checked out The Athletic, I think, Saturday morning. I was like, when's the last time Aaron even wrote for this rag?
Like 3 years, like 3 years ago. Yeah, maybe today. Probably not though, because I need a nap. Yeah, so I went to Vegas. Dan wrote a bunch. John went to a fashion show, and the Twins made a series of moves. I'm trying to phrase this in a way that's correct. Like, I'm not happy or sad either. Well, we can talk about that, but I'm happy that we sort of saw coming what came.
Right.
Although we debated it a lot.
Yeah, we did.
Urshela and Pagan.
And I was wrong. I mean, I was just wrong about the. I thought they'd get more for Urshela. I mean, I think you can safely say if they would not have gotten, they weren't going to hold on to him one way or the other.
That's what we tried to tell you.
Yep. And I didn't believe
Let that be a lesson.
I guess.
Always listen to Aaron.
Yeah,
is that the takeaway?
That's my big takeaway.
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe not. Or how about if Aaron and Dan agree on something?
Maybe
they're either really wrong or really right. Yeah, I mean, with Urshela, we'll get into each, and then they also made a trade for Kyle Farmer, which we're going to talk a lot about, and sort of what the domino effects are of that. But with Urshela, yeah, I mean, I think. Well, first of all, we're cheating a little bit. Me and Dan.
Sure.
Which isn't to say you can't have sources and don't have sources.
Sure, right.
But it's not just my opinion. We start to get some vibes on it, especially even late in the season, although Urshela played really well in August and September.
Yes.
So I thought maybe that might change it a little bit. But we even predicted down to what they would get for him would be a single-A pitcher. Right. I went back and listened to the last one.
Did we really?
Because someone said, boy, you guys were like eerily. And my thing was, we were talking about buckets of balls because that's the cliche in baseball, trade a guy for a bucket of balls. But I said, yeah, they're going to get some low-A reliever, some low-A starter, something like that. And it was Hidalgo, who's actually, I don't know, I had a few people say he's got a chance to be a major leaguer at least, which is what you're kind of trying to look for in that type of trade. But, yeah, I mean, I think actually the Angels, which is perhaps not in my favor to say this, but the Angels viewed Urshela almost precisely like you and I viewed Urshela,
right?
Which is they don't even necessarily have a clear spot for him if Rendon is healthy at third base, but they just looked at him and said, 1 year, $9 million deal for an above-average player. Why we just need the help,
right?
Like they just need the quality depth, which I would have argued, and we did argue, that the Twins aren't necessarily that much better off or so stacked with position player talent that they can afford to get rid of that. But they clearly disagreed. I mean, we did a big thing on the last show of kind of what can they do, what should they do, what will they do, and how those three things are key to understanding pretty much every process by offseason stuff. And in this case, they were 0 for 2 on should they do. They didn't listen to old Aaron and John, which maybe is to their favorite, with Urshela, who we both said we would have kept, and then with Pagan.
Well, I would have I think I would have waited out the offseason for him. I would have tried to get something more in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would have kept him, but been certainly open-minded to a trade.
That's right. That's right. I wouldn't have felt the urgency to get something done before the trade.
But yeah, I believe they would have cut him. I mean, they were going to cut him. Yeah.
And I'm surprised. I mean, listen, what they got back from him,
it's fine. I mean,
it's fine.
Run of the mill trade.
I trust that they went and approached all the teams and said, and that there must have been, tepid interest.
Yeah, I was told they had a few offers. Right. And that they felt this was the best offer. So it wasn't just only the Angels are interested. They they could have picked a low A pitcher from a couple of different teams, basically.
Of course.
Is what they did. I was told, and Dan reported this, which he has much better sources than I ever will, too, that they had significantly more interest in Pagan.
This shocks me.
And here's what I'll say about that. Dan kept phrasing it as, like, to the Twins' favor. Like, he was basically
I thought the same thing.
He was basically saying on Twitter, especially, because once it was announced, we tried to warn people, by the way, like, people are going to be upset by this, people being me. But Dan,
you haven't seen my TikTok rant about it yet.
No. John's, I keep calling you Dan. John's a star on TikTok now. It's, he just told me he got 40,000 views on TikTok, which is like
40,000 on one video.
You're the new, I don't know. I don't even know. Charlie DeMillo. That's a person I heard about in Vegas. That's famous.
Is that right?
For TikTok.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't have any idea.
Some ad with her. But Dan's thing was like, hey, I know you guys are mad about Pagan, all the fans screaming at him on Twitter. I said, don't kill. I quote tweeted his news about it, and I said, "Don't kill the messenger." And I was like, "You know what? Go for it. I'm in Vegas. Who even cares?" He was like, "Thanks for that." But his point was, "Hey, listen, the Twins. You may disagree with the Twins keeping Pagan, although they can still trade him."
Right.
But Dan kept phrasing it as, well, look, they're not the only team that would have kept him. In fact, they had significant or, more trade interest in Pagan than they had in Urshela by a factor of, 2 or 3 probably. And I was like, okay, I get what he's trying to say, but to me, that's even
more damning, right? For the love of God, move him.
Right. It wasn't a choice of either cut him for nothing or keep him, in which case, if you think he's a decent pitcher still, he's going to get like $3.5-4 million via arbitration. Right. If it was a choice of just keep him or cut him, I would have cut him. But you can make the argument that like, okay, we're going to do. But the choice was keep him, cut him, or trade him. And I'm not saying they would have gotten a significant haul. I got to follow up with some people to try to get a sense of what that would have been. It might have been a similar player that they got for a shell. They just had more interested teams because the price tag's lower and everybody needs a reliever at this time of the offseason, all that stuff. But my thing's like, if you add that as a third option, take the third option. Get the 5 teams that like him and tell them to submit final offers and pick one, move on, take the $4 million you saved and go sign a different reliever.
Right. Yeah.
It's not so much that Pagan himself, like we said, if you could remove all memory of what we just watched and you could sort of just view his baseball reference page or baseball savant page, just view his stats or his velocity or stuff without knowing it came from Emilio Pagan or, you go, yeah, this guy throws pretty hard. He misses bats. He gives up a few too many homers, but he's been a reliever for 4. You go, yeah, $3.5-4 million bucks. But I just keep coming back to the idea of, there are other relievers like that you could just switch to and not have the backstory involved.
Don't have the baggage. They're out there without the baggage.
Now, on the other hand, they did trade for Pagan right before opening day. They clearly like Pagan. They stuck with him a lot longer than I ever would have, clearly, even before bringing him back for next season. And so they're certainly believers, and I think given their actions, you would have to assume that the Twins believe he's better than the class of reliever that gets
they would get for
$4 million
for $4 million
bucks or whatever.
Okay,
and I think you can kind of
I
make
think
that
you say
argument.
that.
But again, this is pretty marginal differences here. Is he a $6 million reliever? Well, what's the difference between a $4 million?
Just so we're clear, last year he wasn't even an average reliever, not in terms of results.
Right. Well,
and he hasn't been an average
3 years running.
Yeah, I said he hasn't been since 2019.
That's the thing.
3 years in a row, he has cost his team wins.
Yeah, in terms of win probability, or even just looking at like FIP or just straight here. Look at ERA if you want. I wrote this down. Here's the ERA the last 3 years. This year 4.33, which took a great September, not a great September, but a good September to lower it. The year before that with the Padres 4.83, and by the way, he was horrendous in September for the Padres, cost them. Contributed to them falling out of the playoff mix. And then the year before that, 4.50. Yeah. And in fact, 4 of the last 5 years, he's got both an ERA above 4 and a FIP above 4. And so I don't know, the Twins somewhere along the way became convinced that he's capable of or is much more than just sort of a run-of-the-mill seventh-inning setup man. Right. And I just don't understand how that became such an entrenched thing for a random journeyman 30-year-old reliever who's got like a 3.90 career ERA. I don't get that.
And by the end of the year, he wasn't even a seventh inning setup man. He was a middle inning guy. Hold on. Sorry about that. We just got bumped.
Yeah, Emilio Pagan came into the room and told us to F off. No, some meeting. John and I are like squatters in the room we use to record this.
That's right, yeah.
We're not the permanent residents.
No, we're not.
Often, it's really the same type of person that kicks us out every time. It's like a 60-year-old woman that kicks us. Not the same woman.
No.
It's just a series of this building is
for official business, for some committee business.
This building is thick with him.
My point on Pagan is that they ended the season with him, not even in a seventh inning setup guy. They had him as a mop up guy,
right?
And you can certainly get a mop-up guy for $3.5 to $4 million.
Right.
And now they must think that he can be in high leverage, but that's where I think it all falls apart. Because what he has shown consistently is he can't be used in high leverage.
Right, because one mistake in high leverage, you can 99 good pitches and one mistake in high leverage can cost you games.
Right, and his WPA, that's what it demonstrated. The reason he has a crummy WPA is win probability added, and the point is that you lose a lot of points if you blow big games.
If you make 10 scoreless appearances in a row, pitching the sixth inning when your team is trailing, and then you make one appearance in a tie game in the eighth inning and you serve up a 3-run homer, your double WPA for that 11 total games is going to be hugely negative because the 10 good games didn't really contribute much to wins or losses, and the one bad game, which we saw from Pagan over and over, torpedoed a potential win.
And for 3 years in a row, what we have seen from him is he can't be trusted in high leverage situations.
Right. And
I don't know if it's he just doesn't perform in those situations, or he's just the type of pitcher that it's dangerous to have in high leverage situations.
Right.
His combination of particularly giving up home runs.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. That's the two things you can't do as well. I mean, this is bad for any pitcher, but as a late inning relief pitcher is you got to throw strikes.
Right.
You can't put guys on base because it's always going to be a tie game, 1-run game, 2-run game. You start putting guys on first base, you're going to get into trouble. And then the other thing you can't do, especially once you put guys on first base, is you can't give up a 420-foot home run.
One of the two things he struggled with last year.
Right.
Walking people and giving up home runs.
And so,
and he struggled with the home run thing for years.
It's funny. Like, I think I would not have brought back Pagan. Pagan would not have been on the team after the All-Star break if I were running things, certainly. We've made that very, very clear.
I have no problem with using him in a low leverage situation after the.
And I have no problem even potentially, if he looks good and he's performing well, allowing him to gradually work his way back into, secondary setup man. I don't want him anywhere near, ninth inning or anything like that. But the worry with a situation like this is they're already past the point where I think it would have been reasonable or standard to keep him.
Right.
That was, July probably. Right. And so now it's like, well, what happens now if obviously they could still trade him, but assuming he stays with the team, makes the opening day, he's going to be, 4th or 5th in the bullpen pecking order. I'm assuming something like that's what he would be. And then he goes out there and maybe has a few good games and then starts blowing leads in the 7th inning.
Right.
how quick are they going to be to say, you know what, we did it again?
Right.
How many times do we have to go through this? And we've seen from the Twins, particularly with pitchers, it is not their strength. J. Happ, Matt Shoemaker, Chris Archer, on and on and on.
Right.
It's not their strength to cut bait quickly.
Especially on veterans.
Being the most,
right.
1-for-1, apples to apples here
right.
with Pagan, which is, it's not their, especially with veterans, it's not their strength, and I would argue, especially with veteran free agent signings,
right.
although Pagan wasn't a free agent, he was a trade, but it's not their strength to go, you know what, we still think this guy's pretty good, but it's just not happening, right. And we're not, cutting prime Mariano Rivera here. We're cutting a guy who, even if things are going pretty good, he's your 7th inning reliever. And that's what kind of gets me about it is like, I just don't see the downside is obvious. We saw the downside. I mean, right. The Padres have seen the downside. The Twins have seen the downside. Like that's very obvious. What's not obvious to me is what is the upside that we think is, I mean, obviously any player has all-star upside, theoretically.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like he could
right.
reel off 50 amazing innings. But what is the reasonable, kind of realistic 50th percentile or even like 70th percentile outcome here? And it's just him. Yeah, he's a pretty good setup, man. Are we that hard up? Well, don't answer that. But right. Are we that hard up for, is it that hard to find for $5 million a setup, man? Like, I don't understand that. But he will be back, although.
I also don't fully trust them to keep him in low leverage situations,
right?
Because they just seem to have a blind spot on him.
Well, and also,
they just don't seem to make
right.
good decisions around Emilio Pagan.
Yes, they don't treat. We talked about this in June, probably. They don't treat him as they do, let's say, Trevor McGill,
right?
Because when Trevor McGill has a couple of bad games, Trevor McGill is a mop-up man for the
right.
next 3 weeks.
Right.
Pagan has 5 bad games. He's a mop-up man for 48 hours, and then all of a sudden, tie game, 7th inning, there's Emilio Pagan. Mm-hmm. And the way they use their bullpen, relying so heavily on 1-inning relievers,
right.
means that you start getting into these close games. You have 2 or 3 or 4 close games in a row within the same week, or you go to extra innings a couple of times, and then you're just forced to use him in high leverage. Even you might view him as your mop-up man, but once you've gone through 5 relievers in the game and it's the 9th inning or the 10th inning,
right.
or you used everybody up the day before, then all of a sudden, he's your number 2 guy for this game. And so, yeah, I don't think it's not the worst decision ever. It's just one of those moves where you go, why?
right.
Why do it? Why not just get what you can from him in trade? You're getting some level of value back.
Right.
Clear that $4 million off the books and go sign a reliever for $5 million or $4 million, or don't sign a reliever. Trust
right.
one of your young guys
right.
or whatever. Because there's an opportunity cost there too, where he's kind of locked into a spot. Now, with that said, I mean, they could trade him by the time you're listening to this. There's nothing stopping them from that.
But if you do go out and sign a reliever, you're signing a reliever to be a high leverage reliever, or at least a 7th inning, 8th inning guy.
Sure.
I don't trust him any near that at all. And so if you're just going to have a low leverage reliever, well then just use Trevor McGill.
Yeah, or whoever your best AAA guys,
right.
or use one of your starter prospects who are coming back from injury and are healthy as a reliever. So we've talked about Pagan. I had him 3rd on my list. I wasn't going to lead the show with him.
That is a pretty good one to start with. Let's get some sponsors and then let's get to
Urshela and Farmer and all that. Our first sponsor, Soda Stick, long-time sponsor.
I got to tell you, I was at that uniform event.
Yeah,
and there were
There
were Soda Stick shirts everywhere.
Oh yeah,
of people watching that thing.
I saw a bunch of people with a Rise 316
I did too.
Shirt, which is a good shirt.
Yep.
We talk a lot about the Twins shirts, obviously, that they have, but they have all kinds of Minnesota sports. I've seen people wearing the John Randall shirt, which is in conjunction with Grey Duck Vodka too. They just have great shirts, Minnesota shirts. And the thing I like is,
they've got some good Viking stuff. They've got the Kirko chains one.
Yeah, although that might not be a big seller after yesterday. But yeah, Soda Stick, one of our favorite sponsors.
And good stuff to give over the holidays to
that's what I was going to say. Is
right.
It's perfect because they ship quickly.
Right.
We're about to tell you how you can get a nice little Black Friday, Cyber Monday type of deal on them. And this is not like buying tube socks or a tie for the Minnesota sports fan in your life, for Christmas, holidays, whatever it is.
Great stocking stuffer.
It's a unique enough thing that somebody's going to go, oh, wow. And I've seen this. Decent chance you wear one of these shirts at Target Field. Somebody goes, that's a great shirt.
That's
so it's
right,
the gift that keeps
right.
on giving.
That's right.
And you can get, if you go to Soda Stick, Soda like Minnesota, sodastickco.com, or just Google Soda Stick, they have a Black Friday site-wide. Everything is 20% off. You have to use the promo code. And then Cyber Monday, site-wide, next Monday, everything is 20% off, no promo code. So basically, you can figure out a way to get 20% off.
Yeah, but get out there. Yeah, but on Black Friday and Cyber Monday, swing by Soda Stick because you automatically start getting 20% off. So.
Our next sponsor is Stamps.com, which I used a few years ago. I had the brilliant idea to turn my living room, or actually kitchen, into an assembly line for autographed books.
Yeah.
And I started sending them out, and I realized, I'm going to have to drive to the post office like 8 times a week here and stand in line. And then I realized, nope, I can use Stamps.com, where you can print out your own postage and track the orders and everything, which I found very helpful. And then just drop them into the mailbox, because you can print off the labels, you can keep track of everything. They'll send you a scale if you have to weigh stuff. It's a super good setup, and I say this as someone who you would not picture Aaron Gleeman doing light industrial work. You don't picture me doing any work, and I'm telling you, it was easy. We sent out hundreds of autographed books, and it made it as easy as possible for a task that is not the easiest.
Right.
Stamps.com is what you want to do, and you can sign up with the promo code GEEK. GEEK.
That's right.
For a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage, so you can start printing off stuff on your own.
Right.
And a free digital scale, no long-term commitments or contracts. I can vouch for that.
Yep.
Like, you go month by month basically with them. You just go to stamps.com, and then at the top of the page you'll see like a microphone picture. You just click on that and then enter in the code GEEK, and you can get that trial offer. Stamps.com. You get started today. Okay.
There you go.
Let me just, if I have any last.
Any other thoughts on Pagan?
I think we got most of it. I mean, look, we've been talking about him for.
Let me throw out 2 other things that are much more nitpicky about it.
Yeah.
First is, now you're really going to go to arbitration with it? Like, you couldn't arrange a contract with him before before
I
that
think
at the time?
Probably part of that was they were taking trade offers on him.
Well, I guess.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's hard to negotiate a contract with a guy who there's a decent chance you're about to trade him. Because, I mean, clearly.
But they didn't.
Well, no.
No, I get it.
I think, I doubt it goes. It might not go to arbitration. I don't know that are they a dead set file and trial team with this front office? I don't remember what their thing is. But
I don't think so.
they got to deal with Garlic, but nobody else.
Right.
So that means there's a whole bunch of guys they need to settle with.
that's
So
right.
I bet it gets settled. But
especially on a guy that I think is borderline to keep anyway. Now, they clearly don't think he was borderline to keep.
well, and you would have to argue that the league doesn't feel he's borderline to keep.
I guess.
I mean, there were multiple other teams
Right.
that would have kept him via arbitration. That's clear.
Right. So I guess that, and then the second one is that from a PR standpoint,
It's so funny. I have this.
from a PR standpoint, if you're going to do this, again, this probably comes down to, they thought they might trade him. You've got to make it clear a week ago that
But they
that
can't,
you're
'cause they were
keeping
calls,
him.
I think.
You're keeping.
But you're saying
keeping
you
him
ruined
around.
your fashion show by
But
keeping
you
him
ruined
there?
it. Ruined the fashion show. It ruined the Urshela trade. It ruined the Farmer trade. All anybody wants to talk about is those stupid Twins kept Emilio Pagan. Like, that's it. Especially when you're unveiling the logo, which is a several $1 million kind of thing.
It's something. I'll phrase it this way: it's something the Twins certainly perceive as a very big deal.
Right.
Now, you and me,
Right.
maybe me especially, I don't care about anything like that. But yeah, I agree with that. I also just think it's an example of, from like a fan morale standpoint, even setting aside the timing of it.
Right.
It's one of those things that we talk about often with this front office, which is they will jump through hoops and make the roster less flexible and limit Baldelli's options in game, and they will make 1,000 marginal decisions and moves to improve by 1% in their mind. Now, I would argue this doesn't improve them, but in their mind, they're going, well, why would we cut Pagan, who we view as this caliber of reliever to do what we just said, which is just sign a different guy for $4 million. If they think Pagan is 4% better than anybody they could sign for $4 million, they're going to keep the guy who's 4% better. Whereas I would argue you should be the opposite of that, which is if it's just around the margins, you should be willing to smooth out those small percentages and not bend over backwards and do weird roster things that they did all season to squeeze out these tiny little gains. When is that worth more? More often than not, they've not even been correct about.
Well, this is the bigger
point. But then,
point,
even
right?
if you are correct, and Emilio Pagan is 5% better than a similar reliever you could sign for that type of money, well, now fans are just upset about it, and people are if he does struggle, that's going to be another nail in the coffin of why can't
even if you're right, and it's not clear that first of all if there's there's probably other flaws I can think of in terms of how this front office does things. But one that is clear is they're stubborn as hell.
Right. That's kind of what
when it comes to evaluating pitching.
Right.
And this felt like a jump the shark kind of move. Like this, like everything lines up on one side here.
Right.
Why are we doing this?
It's going to be very clear whether they were right or wrong. I mean,
right.
I also think even if they were sort of right, and he has just kind of a run-of-the-mill 3.75 ERA, 60 innings, gives up 9 homers or something.
Maybe he is a decent seventh inning.
Right. Every bad moment is going to completely upset this fan base. Now, I will say that this fan base is at the point now, at least based on Twitter and those, they're upset about everything. There's nothing that doesn't upset this fan base at this point. So maybe that's not. I just think there's a lot of.
You don't want the mob to rule your decision making on this stuff, right? But this one just seems.
Yeah, it's strange.
Stubbornness to this. I
don't get it. I really don't. And I mean, realistically, what kind of performance does he have to have for this to be an acceptable decision? I think again, if you could strip it of all. Prior knowledge and him, and you could just say, what does a reliever need to do to be worth $3.8 million?
Sure.
It's 60 innings of league average
Tyler Clippard a few years ago was right. You know what
basically.
I mean?
But I just think even if he does that, you're going to sit there at the end of it and go, was that worth it? Now, I will say, Emilio Pagan is very well liked. I would describe him as a good dude from what I know. His interactions with me have been very nice, even though I've often not said good things of him as a pitcher. And so that certainly, if that's a tie-breaking thing, they like having him around. He's a good dude. He's durable. He can pitch mop-up. He doesn't complain publicly about that. All sorts of things. Those are sort of little factors, I guess, within that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't get it. I think there is a decent chance they end up trading him because this does, in a weird way, give them a little more leverage, except for the ticking clock component may have forced some teams to feel like if they don't make an offer on Pagan, then Pagan won't be available. Now they know Pagan is being kept by the Twins, which does hammer home the point that the Twins value him. They're not just trying to give him away, except now,
I suppose.
Except now free agency is just rolling, so you can just go sign a reliever a little bit. So I don't know. Let's talk about Urshela, and then we'll spend a bunch of time talking about Kyle Farmer too, because that's the actual addition to the team. I will say they changed Pagan's pitch mix a little bit down the stretch. Stopped getting hammered on that cutter that we leave over the plate. So I mean, they clearly think they can dial back some of this, dial up some of this. The raw stuff is still good. I don't get why. I guess what I would say about Pagan is why him? Why specifically are we living and dying and sinking and swimming with Emilio Pagan, who has just been a journeyman, random league average reliever for his career, essentially,
and whose results have never matched his his StatCast data.
Yes, and I think his stuff is vastly overrated. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit before, but in 2002. He has A+ stuff. In 2023, he's got 85th percentile stuff, something like that. I don't know what the Savant page says about that. But if you have 85th percentile stuff and you have 0th percentile ability to not serve up 500-foot homers, that's a bad combo. Okay, so getting back to Urshela. They clearly, this move, I think, was spurred by two things. One is Urshela has 1 year under team control. He's, I don't know, 31, 32, something like that. So he wasn't going to be a long-term part of their plan. At $9 million and change projected via arbitration, that's a significant chunk of money. I certainly would argue he's been worth more than that in most years, including last year when he was worth 2 or 3 times that much. But then beyond that, they have Jose Miranda, who was a third baseman coming up through the minors, but played mostly first base and DH as a rookie because of Urshela's presence. And, I asked Falvey about this last month, straight up, and I said, do you still view Miranda as a third baseman long term? And he says, yes, we would like to get Miranda playing more third base. We still look at that as his sort of primary position.
He said something to the effect of, we think our best lineup
has him at third base.
Because
it's not because of him so much, although he's going to have to show that he's a better defender than he showed as a rookie for that to work. But it's because if you play Miranda at third base, that opens up either the DH spot or the first base spot for Arise, Kirilloff, Wallner, Larnach, Edward Julian, Byron Buxton at the DH spot. Whereas if you,
or Abreu.
Yeah, or a free agent signing or something like that, or a trade, Right. Whereas if you play Miranda at first base DH and Arise is the other first base DH, well, now anytime Kirilloff plays, he's out in left field, which is not great defensively, and you still need a third baseman, but they had Urshela, which is, I don't quite, I buy the argument that Miranda, sort of on an island, Miranda is more valuable at third, assuming he's a reasonably capable defender, and that the lineup flexibility is certainly better. Anytime you can move a guy up the defensive spectrum, you open up spots for hitters at the bottom of the defense.
Exactly right.
But all that falls apart a little bit because they had Urshela. They had him already. And what are the odds? I was thinking about this. Urshela had a 118 OPS plus, something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, he's
something like that, 121 or 118,
between 10 and 15% better than a league average hitter most years. He's not a great hitter, but he's a good, solid hitter, and he's a solid defender. What are the odds that, you move Miranda to third base, you open up first base DH for somebody? What are the odds that Kirilloff, Larnach, Wallner, Julian, whoever you're playing at first DH, obviously Arise is a different story. What are the odds that those guys are going to produce more than a 115 OPS plus? Not that high. None of them did this past season, certainly.
Yeah,
and so I think that's the flaw in that. I think this is much more of a neutral sort of coin flip type of situation, one of those 60-40, 40-60 decisions.
Sure.
In my mind,
I would do it as well. I'd like it.
I would keep him as well.
No, I would have
traded.
I would have tried to open up a spot for Miranda at third base. I would have done that.
It's a big picture plan that makes more sense.
Right. To me, I like that plan. I'm surprised that Urshela doesn't have a bigger market.
Right.
I just think, and I keep saying that, and I don't really explain it. The reason why I'm surprised at it is there's just not a good market for third baseman this year. There's a free agent situation.
He'd be the best free agent.
Yeah, I think he would be the best free agent. Yeah, right.
Because Nolan Arenado opted into his contract didn't opt out.
And so, how often do you get the best guy at a position for a 1 year, $9 million deal?
Right.
Now, he's not outstanding, but he's 20% better average hitter than 20% better than average hitter, and he plays. Third baseman is not a premium defensive position, but it's maybe fourth.
It's a different story than first base DH, certainly.
Well, and I would say it's even probably tougher to find than a corner outfielder or even a second baseman. In terms of where that is on the
definitely
defensive
corner
spectrum.
Outfield,
it's there's center field, shortstop, and catcher, and then there's probably third base.
Yeah, second or third base, I'd say. He's the player type that for the last 10 or 15 years pretty consistently gets squeezed in the arbitration process or just sort of the overall valuation process, which is, we saw it with Trevor Plouffe, we saw it with Eddie Rosario, just with the Twins, but there's examples all over the place, which is good, solid, average regulars who are not part of the team's long-term plan, both because they're 30 and because they're nearing free agency, and they're no longer cheap. They're not expensive, but $8 to $10 million is a chunk of change, especially for a team like the Twins that limits their payroll. And you start to see it you saw it with Plouffe. They non-tendered him. It was almost an exact same situation as Urshela. Plouffe was, 260, 15, 20 homers, okay defense at third base. That's Urshela. Yeah. And Plouffe was going to make $8 or $9 million. Now, this was 10 years ago, so that was a little more. And they non-tendered him. Same thing with Rosario. Rosario was a good, solid starting corner outfielder. He hit 275 with 20-something home runs. But was he worth $8 or $10 million? It's debatable, but that's the type of player that gets squeezed. What teams want are average guys who make the league minimum and are young, who are either projectable to improve or at least can be penciled in for multiple years, or they want star guys for big money. And so the average-ish veteran, not young, not in the team plans, and not somebody that you go, I think next year's going to be the year that Gio Urshela really. Right. No, there's none of that with Gio Urshela. Right. I mean, a great Gio Urshela year is going to be 10% better than an average Gio Urshela year. And so those are the guys that get squeezed, and those are the guys, like you said, that you look at and you go, hey, it's weird that only a few teams.
I mean, I take a look at him on the free agent market, and I think to myself, does he not? I would think he would get a multi-year deal. He would get a 2-year, $16 million, 3-year, $24 million deal, something like that. And the $9 million deal.
I agree. I didn't think, by the way, 6 months ago, that I'd be sitting here going, basically being a Gio Urshela fan. Not that he was a bad player or anything, but I just thought, I don't know. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think they need to be very confident in Miranda. Although I will say that if Miranda. I don't know. I mean, it's very mixed opinions on Miranda. I mean, first of all, the eye test, we looked at him, we watched him. Sure. I think he played 25 games at third. But even when he was in the minors, having his breakouts.
I didn't notice him sucking at third.
Well, right.
Because I'll say that.
He struggled at both, first and third.
Wait, I remember him sucking at first. I don't remember him sucking at third.
Right. The reason the struggles at first stood out was because, you see fewer people struggle at first. Right. There are fewer mistakes made at first because third base, you make a mistake, you go, it was a tough play. There's a lot less of that at first base. But also he was learning that position, and there was a sense of he just kind of looks like a guy who hasn't played much first, which he did. He's played plenty of third. I mean, he came up through the minors. He played some second. He played third a lot. Even when he was having his breakout season in 2021 between AA and AAA, minor league player of the year and all that stuff, the reviews on his defense got worse as the reviews of his hitting got better. Like every month I would check in with some scouts who watched him or somebody with the Twins who, keeping tabs on it, and they would go, well, we just think the bat is for real. We've just been so impressed with his ability to, hit for contact but maintain power. And I'd go, how's the glove at third? And they go, guy's a real good hitter. He's just a real good hitter. And so I think
but that could be the opposite of the catcher thing.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Right. But I think we sort of saw that. I mean, he's not a bad fielder. I just think he's a big body, doesn't move particularly well. I don't mean like a fat guy. He's not in bad shape or anything. Not at all. But he's just a big guy. He lacks that sort of quick twitch movement. He has an okay arm, but he doesn't have a great arm. And so I think at third, what you're hoping for is just sort of, I don't know, mediocrity would certainly work at third base defensively. Make the plays you can get to. Don't airmail throws. There's a lot of debate about how Urshela was at third too, because the metrics are not great and never have been on Gio Urshela. Right. But Gio Urshela's entire career, when he was with Cleveland coming up, he was a utility guy with Cleveland. It was great glove, can't hit. Well, then he started to hit, and then it was like, well, actually, his glove maybe isn't that good. I was impressed by Urshela at third base. I mean, I'm willing to believe that the highlight reel plays outstrip the overall value as a defender. I think his highlights misrepresent his overall quality at third, but I still think he's certainly an average defensive third baseman, which I don't think is likely for Miranda, but he could surprise. I mean, I'll also say, though, if Miranda does look overmatched at third base, mid-season, we've talked a lot about like Royce Lewis being a shortstop option. Royce Lewis could also be a third base option. Yep. And Brooks Lee. I've had multiple scouts who have watched Brooks Lee now, and people who evaluated him for other teams in the draft process say, oh, he's going to be a Gold Glove third baseman. Now, the Twins would obviously love Lewis and or Lee to be capable of playing shortstop. Right. But if their sort of fallback in both cases is to play third base, well, then you're giving Miranda kind of a 1 year or maybe even a half year window to say, all right, you've been a third baseman. You want to play third base? Gio Urshela is out of the picture. Right. Now you are starting third baseman. I think he's still going to play some first base and DH probably. Perhaps Kyle Farmer might play a little bit of third base too. Mm-hmm. But it's a chance for Miranda to go, look, there's a reason I've been a third base prospect for most of the past 5 years. I can be a solid third baseman, and that's the prototype, right? Is it like a number 5 hitting third baseman,
right,
who hits you 275 with 25 homers? I mean, that's been a baseball
that's
prototype
right.
for 50 years or whatever.
That's
so
right.
he has a window to do that. And if he can't do that, if that proves to be sort of a stretch for him defensively, you can always move him back to first base DH, or you can have him bounce around like he did last year, and then you just got to find a third baseman, whether that's Lewis, Brooks Lee, someone up. Now, they did trade Spencer Steer and Christian Encarnacion Strand,
right,
both of whom have the chance to be future starting third basemen in the majors. So that's a little bit tricky on that front. But
yeah, I mean they've got lots of backup plans there. I agree with them that that's their best lineup is to have Miranda at third base and open up some some hitting spots at first and at DH. So I mean, I expected the move and I like the move. I'm surprised they didn't get more in return. But I'm just probably overvalue Gio Urshela.
Apparently,
that's what I'm learning.
But here's what we've also learned. Now it's relevant that most teams, including the Twins, did not see Gio Urshela as a positive value at $9 million on a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's a fact. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't mean he's not worth
right. Yes,
$9 million on a 1-year deal. Transitioning into the Farmer thing, one thing I found interesting about the Farmer pickup, Kyle Farmer, who they got from the Cincinnati Reds, who now they've made 3 sizable trades with the Reds in the last 12 months.
Right.
They got Sonny Gray from the Reds last spring, and then mid-season they got Tyler Mahle from the Reds. By the way, if people think Tyler Mahle was like damaged goods that they got from the Reds, there's clearly no grudge being held because their next trade after that was the trade for Kyle Farmer. The one thing, though, as they acquire Kyle Farmer, who we're going to talk about here, from the Reds for Casey Legumina, who was a right-handed relief pitcher from Gonzaga. I think he was like a 7th-round pick or something a few years ago, who they had just added to the 40-man roster 2 days earlier to protect him from the Rule 5 draft, which is kind of interesting. And then Farmer was the Reds' version of Urshela, because he was arbitration eligible. It wasn't his final season. He's actually under team control for next year
as well. But
he's projected by MLB trade rumors, whereas Urshela was projected for around $9 million. He's projected for around $6 million, 5.9, I think. I'm surprised that that's as high as it is. I'm not saying the projections are wrong. I'm just saying you're only saving $3 million. Probably by going from Urshela to Farmer, and so the monetary savings is not significant.
And then you spent it on Pagan anyway.
Well, you basically chose, I guess, Pagan and Farmer. I hate to group Farmer with that before people even get a chance to look at him. But that's what's interesting about Kyle Farmer is $6 million is a weird number for the role that he's like
we'll
sort of in the
role is.
But that's the thing, right?
It.
So
$6 million is in the same way that $9 million is about as much as you'd want to pay Gio Urshela on a 1-year deal, right? $6 million is about as much as you want to pay Kyle Farmer on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and I actually don't think $6 million for a season of Kyle Farmer is bad. I think he's worth $6 million. If he's your starting shortstop, which right now he would be.
Yeah, right.
$6 million. I mean, think about who are the free agents we talked about. If they miss out on
Iglesias and Andrews,
Elvis Andrews, we guessed 1 year $8 million. I think on those guys.
That's right.
So it's essentially you chose Farmer over them. Farmer compared to them, it's pretty similar. I mean, he's a lot younger than the two of them, but I think the goal with all those guys is sort of 8th or 9th place hitter in the lineup. Can you be a 90 OPS type of guy, OPS plus type of guy, below average but decent for a shortstop? Can you play average-ish defense? Well, he's in the same boat as those guys. And even another trade option, who they traded for a day last year, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Last year he was going to make like $5 million, and this year the Yankees just signed him to avoid arbitration for like $6 million or something. I
was wondering if they held on to him.
Those are 3 shortstops, 2 free agents, Andrews and Iglesias, 1 very gettable again. Under contract player in Kiner-Falefa. all probably a 1 year, I don't know, let's call it $6 to $10 million range, something like that. Right. And so relative to those guys, I think Farmer at $6 million plus whatever chance you think that they'd want him again for the next year.
Right.
It's not like he's going to get some massive raise. He'd probably be $8 million the year after that.
Maybe, yeah.
I think he fits in that category. Like if you're comparing him value-wise, monetary contract to the Andruses, the Iglesiases, the Kiner Falefas, that second or third tier, he's a lower end starting shortstop.
Yeah.
But he is capable of being a starting shortstop, and that does plug a gaping hole.
Right.
The question is just, will that actually come to fruition, or is that only temporary plugging that hole? And that's where the $6 million is a weird number.
Right.
Because if he's your starting shortstop, and let's say he's batting 8th or 9th in the lineup, he's going to play 125 games at shortstop. If Lewis is ready in July, he's not good enough.
Or Brooks Lee is.
Right, or Brooks Lee's ready in July. Right. Kyle Farmer is not such a special player that he can't or won't be pushed aside into a utility role. And obviously, if they were to re-sign Carlos Correa, then Farmer is your utility man. If they were to sign Bogarts or Dansby Swanson or trade for I don't know, somebody, Farmer goes into that utility role. $6 million for a utility man, though, is quite a bit.
That's a little bit.
Now they paid Marwin $8 or $9 million, but Marwin was viewed as a starting player who just bounced around.
He was just a 10th starter. Right. Yeah.
Whereas Farmer, he's capable of being an everyday player, but Farmer as an everyday third baseman is not a starting caliber player.
No.
He's either a low,
but he's a good complement for the other utility player you've got on the roster, Nick Gordon, because he's a right-handed hitter who hits lefties.
Yes, and Farmer can play shortstop.
And he can play shortstop. Right, he plays the position. He plays the one position that Gordon struggles with to some extent.
Let's not even say whether or not Gordon can play shortstop. The Twins do not believe he can consistently play shortstop, which is what matters.
He might be in case of emergency.
He might be Ozzie Smith for all we know. But if the Twins don't believe it, I think I can be Ozzie Smith, but the Twins won't let me play shortstop either. But that's what I mean. So $6 million for a low end starting shortstop is the going rate, or maybe slightly below the going rate.
Right.
$6 million for a high end utility man, though, it's a premium.
That's too much. Yeah.
Now, is it going to break the bank? No. But it does establish a floor. Right. Which we have been obsessed about with the Twins as their MO year after year after year with this front office, which is
early in the offseason
they lay the foundation, whether it's getting Tyler Austin as their DH and then waiting out Nelson Cruz and bringing him in. Well, then you bump Tyler Austin. But if you hadn't gotten Nelson Cruz, same thing. Kiner Falefa.
Yeah, Tyler Austin. I'd forgotten about
They
Tyler
go out
Austin.
and get Kiner Falefa. He's their starting shortstop for 1 day. And then turns out, no. Carlos Correa was the starting shortstop.
That's exactly right.
But in the meantime, they clearly like the idea of, look, if we whiff on everything, if our MO of waiting out the market and letting kind of things shake out deals and available players who wouldn't have been available 3 months earlier, like Correa or even Josh Donaldson, Nelson Cruz, Kenta Maeda was a trade that happened, I think, in January or something like that. All those things happen after they already kind of had in place, I don't want to say a good option, but sort of a palatable option, which is like, look, at shortstop,
an option,
we want to re-sign Correa. If we don't re-sign Correa, we want to sign Xander Bogaerts or Dansby Swanson, or go trade for fill in the blank shortstop. Right. But if none of those things come to fruition, whether by our choice or they're just not gettable, well, we got Kyle Farmer. He can be the shortstop.
That's right.
And I think they seem to take great
and it allows them if say. The market on those 4 shortstops is just crazy, right?
They're not over-leveraged.
They can also pivot then to, maybe we take a look at a Braver. Maybe we take a look at a big bat. We try to acquire a big bat and throw him over at first base because we've got shortstop covered. We don't have to get, we don't have to overpay at any particular position. Or, we see the starting pitching market looks like it's pretty good.
Which I think
we take advantage of that.
Is a sound strategy, and I actually think it's almost a must strategy. I mean, they clearly take great comfort in putting in place, lower end options that makes them feel comfortable enough that, again, if we whiff, we're not just left completely empty handed. And I do think, for better or worse, their strategy is to wait things out and show extreme patience, not only in free agency, but often in the trade market. If you look at what are their 5 biggest acquisitions, at least 4 of them happened after the first of the year. Correa happened in spring training.
Right.
Obviously. Lance Lynn happened in spring training. I mean, that's their MO, and I do think if that's the approach you're going to take and just extreme patience, let the market sort of musical chairs itself into a spot where you're the last chair remaining and there are 3 guys who – it almost has to be paired with the approach they also take, which is set the baseline, set the floor, and then spend the next 4 months trying to parse through what's left. Right. And if you can't make it work, if you can make it work, then you bump that fallback option.
You kind of allow the market to come to you when you've got everything here. You don't have to – you're not chasing stuff.
I think, macro level or whatever, like that is the pair of approaches that I think work the best. What happens, though, is in the meantime – the majority of fans, or the average fan, the casual fan, just goes, really? They're going to let Correa walk and Kyle Farmer's going to be the replacement at shortstop? Which I've seen people go, well, don't worry, Kyle Farmer's not going to be the starting shortstop on opening day. I would bet on that if you gave me some odds.
Yeah, right.
I don't think he's likely to be the starting shortstop, but I certainly think it's a coin flip.
Well, I think there's a much better chance that Kyle Farmer's your opening day shortstop than Carlos Correa is your
yes, absolutely. Right, exactly.
Okay, let's talk some more about Farmer, but first let's talk a little bit about a couple more of our sponsors. Storyworth. I've been a big proponent of Storyworth, and I was a big proponent. This holiday, I'm not going to have any conversations with my parents. I'm only going to be able to see the stuff that they wrote about on Storyworth. Like, I'm so glad that I found Storyworth 5 years ago.
It creates lasting memories, stuff you can look back on and read, because the idea behind Storyworth, and John got it for his parents the past few years, which is they will send, you get it for your mom, you get it for your dad, you get it for your whatever. They'll send email prompts to them, asking them just sort of some basic questions. Where'd you grow up? What was your first job? All this stuff, but also tell me a time where you took a risk. Tell me a time where you, whatever. What was the best night you ever had? Well, all that stuff. And they take the responses. First of all, people who you would buy this for will enjoy doing that.
Yes. Yeah. And then
second of all,
they take the responses, and first of all, you get the response.
Right. You can see
you get the response, and then I would take those responses, I'd forward them to my brother.
Right. Because they maybe didn't tell this
my
story.
kids. Right. Yeah.
But then at the end of the year, they will also put all these responses together into a literal book.
Right.
That then you can have a keepsake that it becomes almost like a biography of the person you're getting, or like, the best of your mom or your dad or your grandparents or whatever. So it's a perfect gift for the holidays, and also it's a pretty unique gift. Again, it's not buying somebody a tube socks. This is something that they've not gotten before.
It's also one of those things you can get at the last second. You don't have to go out and buy it. So you just go online and grab it.
Knowing our listeners. If it's December 23rd and you're like, oh no.
So help your family share their story this holiday season with Storyworth. Go to storyworth.com/Gleeman, regular promo code Gleeman, today, and save $10 on your first purchase. That's STORYWORTH, storyworth.com/Gleeman. Save $10 on your first purchase, storyworth.com/Gleeman.
Next sponsor is HelloFresh, which is meal kit delivery, which you can save money. It's 25% cheaper than takeout and less expensive than traditional grocery shopping. It's also, and I value this, it's just a lot less annoying than traditional grocery shopping. They send you exactly what you need.
And you're talking to a guy who lives above a grocery store.
So it's still, well, you're talking the world's laziest human, but whatever. But I also we've tried to cook and grocery shop for the ingredients and all that stuff, but I never know how much to get. And then you go, oh, great, I have 40 pounds of potatoes left. What am I going to do with that?
I'll give you another thing. We'll go out of town, like we go to Philadelphia to watch the World Series on a moment's notice. We get back. We got nothing in the house, and that morning, Storyworth shows up with 3 new meals.
Or HelloFresh shows up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, HelloFresh, yes. Shows up.
HelloFresh shows up. Right. And the idea is you can save time, you can save money cooking at home, and it will show up at your doorstep. Everything is pre-portioned out with fresh ingredients, and whether you're a decent cook or not, they give you step-by-step recipe, and it's more than just a recipe. They'll actually put pictures of it, which is very helpful for someone like me. So they'll be like,
and for kids,
for kids, you can turn it into a date night thing, which we've done before. Cooked for that
night. Yep.
It's great, and also the food's actually good. Like I can't cook a thing, but I've produced plates that I've really enjoyed using HelloFresh, and you can get a great deal to give it a try, you can go to HelloFresh.com/Gleeman65 and use the promo code Gleeman65. And the reason for that is you can get 65% off plus free shipping to give it a try. You go to the site, you pick what you want. They have vegetarian friendly stuff. They have meat eater stuff. They got kids or family stuff. Just a lot of menu selections. So you go to HelloFresh.com/Gleeman65. Use the promo code Gleeman65. You get 65% off America's #1 meal kit plus free shipping. Couldn't be easier. Okay. Let's see some other Kyle Farmer stats. So he's been the Reds. He came up. I remember Kyle Farmer. I think I wrote about him as a prospect. He was in the Dodgers farm system. He was a college shortstop, I think, at Georgia. SEC. Some SEC.
We should mention he's 32 years old.
31, 32.
He's 32.
He was. Well, he didn't reach the majors until he was 26. But he was I think a 3 or 4 year starter. I want to say Georgia. It was an SEC school as a shortstop. The Dodgers then drafted him like in the 6th, 8th round, something like that. Made him a catcher in the minors, and for he moved up to AAA and even reached the majors as a catcher. He debuted at like 26. Pretty good numbers in the minors, not great numbers, but a solid hitter, decent catcher.
Nice to have an emergency catcher.
I mean, he was right. He gets to the majors and he caught games for the Dodgers, who were a good team certainly at that time. But then he started to move back to shortstop, third base, second base because they turned him into like a super utility guy. Right. Like super utility guy means they can play all the positions. You add catcher into that mix,
right? That's crazy.
And that's a real. Right. And so he played a lot of infield for the Dodgers as sort of a bit player. They traded him to the Reds. He was part of the Matt Kemp, Yasiel Puig, that trade in 2018, I want to say something like that.
Wow.
Then he gets to the Reds. He served as like a utility guy for the Reds, and he hit decently, so they moved him into a bigger role. And for the past 2 years, he's been their starting shortstop. He started like 100 and something games on average per year as a starting shortstop.
They had, I think 2 years ago, they had a prospect that they thought they were going to be turning the shortstop over to. He struggled tremendously, and Farmer just ended up picking up.
And I remember at the time, people, because he came up as a catcher, the idea of him as a starting shortstop, people were like, seems crazy.
Right.
But it was the catcher that was actually the change for him. He was a starting shortstop in college and all that.
Yeah.
And so he hasn't caught a game since 2019. But that's a lot more recent than anybody else has caught a game who can play shortstop. Right. Although Kiner Falefa was also same situation. They moved him to catcher.
And then this year he ended up kind of starting out as their full-time shortstop.
Yes.
But they did have another prospect that they thought the prospect struggled again, by the way.
He ended up starting like 120 games or something.
He played pretty much shortstop full-time up through like middle of July, something like that. And then basically played second base the rest of the year because they were trying to give this prospect some chance, and then hit 160 or something like that.
Could play out with the Twins with Royce Lewis or Brooks Lee, which is you're the starting shortstop, but you're keeping the seat warm. We hope.
That's right.
You look at his numbers, and past 2 years when he's been playing regularly, those are only 2 years of his career he's played regularly because he was a late blooming guy. 715 OPS combined the past 2 years, average of 15 homers per season. 90 OPS plus, which what that means is 100 is always the league average. So 90 means you're about 10% worse than a league average hitter, but keep in mind, shortstops collectively are worse than a league average hitter.
Right.
So a 90 OPS plus as a shortstop is basically league average for a shortstop, give or take a point or two here or there. The defense grades out decently, average-ish. He's had 2 years ago, he was a plus. Last year, he was a slight minus. I think the consensus, just in terms of eye test and all that, seems to be, he's a decent starting shortstop. He's not going to wow you with any plays, but he's got decent range. He's got an okay arm. He's a reliable guy more so than a wow highlight reel type of guy.
He's also getting to the age where his defense could probably slip a little bit.
So you look at him and you go, okay, I mean, in a way, he's not that dissimilar as relative to shortstops than Urshela is relative to third baseman. Now, Urshela was better last year, but just
Urshela was also basically a utility player who ended up moving around and finding a spot at third base full time.
I mean, I think if you were to kind of project out of 30 starting third basemen for 2023, Urshela would be somewhere in certainly the bottom half.
Right.
You know, in the 15 to 20 range, let's say. Farmer probably is in the 22 to 28 range among shortstops, so he's a little bit lighter.
Yeah,
On the other hand, those shortstops...
He's a below-average hitter.
But not for a shortstop.
Well, not for a shortstop. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah,
Gio Urshela, for relative
That's
to third base, is a little above average. I would say Farmer is maybe slightly below average for a shortstop. Right. But also shortstop, as we talked about, is just a harder position to fill. So an average shortstop is worth more than an average or slightly below average third baseman. So I think in that sense, I kind of get what they're doing if you view Urshela and Farmer as sort of a weird swap in a way.
Right. Yep.
And in this case, you know, Urshela was not going to play shortstop for the Twins. I know he's played shortstop in the past for other teams, but he wasn't going to be a shortstop option for the Twins.
He was also a break glass in case of emergency guy for the Yankees, right? Yeah.
And I think this does fit what they're trying to do or what they're hoping will happen midseason, which is that Lewis is healthy and reestablishes himself as a long-term shortstop. Or if that doesn't happen, Brooks Lee establishes himself as a shortstop option. And so Farmer, like logistically, it's much easier to move Farmer into a utility role and still take advantage of some value and some roster formation with him. Whereas if Urshela were to struggle or Miranda were needed as a primary third baseman to the point that Urshela got bumped to the bench, Urshela doesn't have as much like literal utility in a bench role as Farmer does. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the ability to play shortstop, much like the ability to play catcher, which he can also do, sort of, and center field, is a differentiating factor in a lot of cases because very few people are ever going to look at the season Gio Urshela just had and the season Kyle Farmer just had and conclude anything other than Gio Urshela was significantly better than Kyle Farmer. His raw numbers were significantly better. And he was better than Kyle Farmer. I'm just here to make an argument that Farmer relative to shortstops and Urshela relative to third baseman, it's closer than the overall number. I still like Urshela in that. But it's a lot closer to the overall thing. And you factor in the scarcity, the supply and demand of shortstop, there aren't as many fallback options. So I get that approach to it. But again, none of that's going to matter to the average fan or to the Twins win total.
Right.
If he's just your opening day shortstop and you haven't, look, he can be your opening day shortstop. First of all, people are going to be annoyed by that. But I'm saying it's fine if he's your opening day shortstop. If Carlos Rodon is your opening day starter, and Jose Abreu is your opening day cleanup hitter,
exactly right.
It is not fine to have Kyle Farmer as your opening day shortstop. If Sonny Gray is your opening day starter, and I don't know, Alex Kirilloff's your opening day, which is, I mean, that's fine too. But they need to. The only reason to make this trade is to set the floor for something bigger, or to leave maximum
this is a
flexibility.
Precursor, and they've done, like we said, they've done this year after year, off season after off season, and we get antsy. Right, we get antsy around middle of January. We're like, how are they going to spend the $40 million? How are they going to spend the $50 million? They've got
that's
left on the roster. We'll see. We'll see. I guess. I mean, by now you would think I'd learned some patience. I'm still not convinced that
I'm the I've been accused of being. I don't let the microwave beep. Let's put it at my patience level. Becky makes fun of me about that.
That's funny.
I can never let it beep unless I'm out of the room or something. But if I'm sitting there, it's getting opened at 0.2 or whatever. You know, like
that's
payroll wise.
I mean, last year was an excellent example, by the way. Like it was a week, it was into spring training, and they still had $35 million to spend, and they found a way to do it. Now, I don't know how they managed to. Like that's a once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Let's put it this way: I was at Twins spring training before Carlos Correa last year, and I didn't even go early.
Right.
So that's how late it was. From a, like you said, from a what do they have left standpoint, you know, spending wise, a couple of things here. Like one is, in terms of just gaping holes, they now have none.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying they can go into the season and start right now, but they 3 days ago they did not have a shortstop.
Backup catcher is the only one, or the 40% catcher is the only one.
But I mean, you could.
Yes, right.
I'm not saying they filled every hole well. I'm not saying they should stop by any means. Do not stop.
Right.
I'm just saying last week they literally didn't have a shortstop. Right. Now they have someone who can play shortstop. They've brought Pagan back for the bullpen, which could potentially be full. You start to look at the 6 or 7 options there. They need a catcher, but you could re-sign Sandy Lane. I mean, but they don't want to do that. They don't want Kyle Farmer to be the opening at shortstop. Right. They don't want Ryan Jeffers to be the starting catcher. They don't want Emilio Pagan to be the seventh inning guy. Right. So there are many, many moves that need to be made. Do not get me wrong. But it is an interesting feeling to go this roster, it's far from cemented in place, and it's far from a great roster. They're worse today than they were at the start of the offseason.
A week ago.
Well, they've lost Correa, first of all.
Well, that's
and
true.
They've basically swapped Urshela for Farmer, which we just talked about. Right. But they have sort of lightly checked every roster spot. So what that means is you have maximum flexibility. Yeah. I'm not saying from a spending standpoint. This is what we've been talking about,
a blank canvas, right?
Right. We thought it was true before. Now it's really true because at least you've brought in a shortstop. Right. You can really look at this roster, and they've every spot is covered, but many spots are covered by lower end options. And so you can basically say whether it's a number one starter, whether it's a star shortstop, whether it's a starting catcher, whether it's a big bat first base DH type, whether it's a corner outfielder who hits right-handed, or reliever, late inning, on and on and on. Do they absolutely need each and every one of those things to be brought in as an impact player? No, because they have someone there who can take it. But any one of those things could be the spot they invest in or trade for and provide a big upgrade. So it's a weird situation to be in because it's like, we've got the bases covered, but almost everywhere we could look to upgrade.
Right.
And from a monetary standpoint, this brings their payroll. It briefly trimmed $9 million.
Right.
Then it kept Pagan at like $3.5, $4 million. Now it brings in Farmer at like $5.5, $6 million.
Maybe $1 million.
Yeah. So they're at like 90, something like that. I mean, it depends a little bit, but they're at roughly 90 and change. Last year's payroll was 140 and change. I would hope it goes up year after year, but let's set as a baseline last year's payroll. Let's call it 140 again. They ended up spending like 150, I think, because all the injury guys. But
they should have $40 to $50 million
minimally
to spend.
$50 million to spend. And you can truly spend it in a way that you're just trying to bring in the biggest impact you can, because there isn't we absolutely need this, we absolutely need that. Now, you can argue shortstop, they need
starting pitching,
catcher,
big
starting
hitter,
pitcher.
big bat.
Those are still if I were listing them, those are still the main ones. But they have created maximum flexibility. And look, I don't know that should be soothing to Twins fans, but I guarantee the front office loves that.
Sure.
Because this front office perceives themselves as being extremely good when given flexibility, when given options, when given the ability to let the market play out, when given the ability to pivot and pounce. Now, I don't know that they've shown that necessarily.
Yeah.
They've shown that in some cases, individual cases. Yep. I don't know that big picture they've shown that they're great at that relative to X number of teams. But I guarantee they like the idea of we're at a $92 million payroll.
Right.
If we had to put a team out there today, we could do it. Mm-hmm. Now let's get to work trying to find that. But that's the tough part.
I mean, on the one hand, it gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. On the other hand, it can also give you a measure of complacency.
Right.
Right. And I don't think we have seen that with this front office in the past.
It's going to seem like that on January 15th.
Yeah. Right.
It's going to seem like, boy, they haven't really done
anything. Yeah.
Although I do think they're going to move quicker, although maybe I say that at this time every offseason. Maybe it's wishful thinking.
Well, I mean, we should just mention in terms of news, there's definitely stuff going on with Carlos Correa. I mean, there's definitely that the Twins have made a significant offer. I don't think we talked about that last time. From what I've learned about that offer, it's in excess of what we had hoped they would try. When we were kind of saying, 8,250, something like that, or the kind of numbers were thrown away. The offer they made is more significant than that. I still didn't sound to me like that offer was something that could get something done, right? It's a good second or third place offer.
He didn't go,
probably.
I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think they are having some active discussions. I think Correa's, made some counter offers and such. I think people are underestimating how much it's going to take to get Correa signed.
Right.
And I think Twins fans in general, or even baseball people in general, are underestimating. Like he's going to be going for a record contract. And a record contract is over Lindor's $341. $341 million deal. And so now you're kind of playing in the era of, well, do you really want to pay $10,350? Do you want to pay?
As they say in poker, those are the nosebleed stakes.
Yeah, that's right.
You start to get up there and you're like, whew. Yeah. The air up here is a little weird.
Yeah. And that's the way it's going to be.
I gawked at the high stakes poker at Bellagio. I was looking in there.
You gawked.
Becky's like, why don't you go play? And I'm like, I could play one hand. I brought the money enough to play one hand. Should I do it? She's like,
what's the ante in a one game?
The blinds. Well, they were playing the night we went and looked. They were playing 2 and 400, which means the small blind is 200 and the big blind is 400, and then I think they play a $100 person ante. So before the hand starts, there's roughly like $1,200 in the pot.
Wow.
So to make a raise, let's say you get dealt aces.
Right.
You want to put in a 2 or 3 times the blind raise. You're going to be putting in, $1,200 raise or $1,500 raise.
Right, yeah.
Well, if someone raises me back, I'm out. I'm out of money. So I got to sell a plane ticket or something. So anyway, maybe I'll tell a couple Vegas things at the end here. But so let's see. I had some other notes on Kyle Farmer. They clearly like trading with the Reds. I mean, Casey Legumina, who's the pitcher they first added to the 40-man roster and then traded to the Reds. I think, they like him. Actually, when I was making the top 40 list last year at this time, he was still a starter and hadn't pitched a whole lot for them because he'd been hurt. And I ranked him 33rd, mostly on the strength of some Twins officials saying, like, we actually like this guy's going to be a major leaguer. Okay. He struggled a little bit early this year as a starter. They moved him to the bullpen, I think, at AA Wichita. Okay. And he had some success. I mean, he throws 95, good slider. I don't think he's going to be a superstar reliever, but I think he can be, again, a secondary setup man, a Emilio Pagan-esque reliever. I don't want to damn him with that praise, but, a seventh inning guy. That's, a reasonable enough thing to trade for a low-end starting shortstop, I think. But, it's not without, it's a little dent in their depth. But I do think they feel like from the bullpen standpoint, they have some, you're not going to run out, I guess, of, youngish guys you could throw into the bullpen. That's their hope. I had one other thing. Emma, do you think my stance has been that I don't think Kyle Farmer has literally any impact on Carlos Correa. I don't think it moves it plus or minus even 0.1% likelihood or an unlikelihood that they're going to sign Carlos Correa. I think it puts in place a fallback if they do not sign Carlos Correa. But I don't think it will affect their offer to Carlos Correa or their approach to Carlos Correa or their intentions with Carlos Correa. I think it's almost like separate. It's like if this happens, then if this doesn't happen with Correa, then we have Farmer. But I don't think they're going to go, well, we were going to offer you 10 years, $325, but we do have Kyle Farmer in place. We're going to offer you 10 years, $300.
No, I my take on it was it does have some effect. It's minimal, and a minimal negative effect. Here's what I think it makes it more likely they make a big move. Right?
Yeah.
They make a big signing.
Okay.
I think it makes it slightly less likely that big move is a shortstop.
Okay.
I guess as Correa is in that that group, it may be. But to me, I think their interest in Correa goes beyond that of we want a big bat who's a shortstop.
Well, like right, that's the thing, right? When you're at that,
so ultimately, I don't know that it makes much difference.
When you're at that level of signing, there are moves you make because that's a need.
Right.
And if they go out and they sign, even like Wilson Contreras, who's a really good catcher, one of the best catchers of the past of this era.
Yeah.
They would go after him in any I mean, for the right price, any team would want him. He's a really good hitter and he can catch. But the Twins would maybe be more prone to going after him as a free agent right now because they've soured on Ryan Jeffers and they view catcher as a weak spot. Right. But when you get and he's a good all-star player, but when you get to the level of Correa, it doesn't matter what the sort of picture of that position is, at least in the short term, because you're signing him for 10 years. What does it matter about Kyle Farmer?
Yeah, that's right.
So I agree with you that it makes them less focused, perhaps slightly on shortstop specifically.
Right.
But I don't think they'd be less their intensity with Correa, I don't think will be less. And if that makes any sense.
When you're signing Correa, you aren't signing him because he's a shortstop.
It's not because he fills a need.
Because he's it's because
he's beyond the need.
The need isn't shortstop. The need is franchise player, team leader, etc. Face of the franchise for the next 10 years. That's why you are signing him. And Farmer doesn't make much of a dent in that.
I mean, if you're out there looking for a significant other and you go, oh, I really value someone with a good sense of humor, and I value someone who, same religion as me or same morally as me, and they're from the same place I am. And then, some model walks in and goes, you want to go on a date? You don't go, I don't know, your sense of humor is not that great. You go, yeah, we're going to go on a date. We'll figure it out. Right. I mean, you take them to the Dior store, right? I saw a Dior store in Vegas.
Probably in the
and I almost made a joke to Becky, but I realized two things as we were walking by. One is she won't know what the hell I'm talking about because she doesn't pay attention to baseball. Right. And two is you start making Dior jokes with your significant other in Vegas with a pocket full of money, and who's the joke on? 5 minutes later, the joke is on me. And she has a purse from Dior or whatever. Okay, so that's kind of the state of the roster. I mean, it's still basically the start of the offseason, right? Like these were almost scene-setting things.
Yeah,
still. I mean, we knew there was the deadline to add players to the 40-man roster. Then there was the deadline to tender contracts. And that's why the Farmer trade happened right in succession with the Urshela one, because Farmer was the Urshela of the Reds. He was their borderline neutral value guy to keep. So we have a few other things.
And, I mean, we also talked, I think, last episode about how, would the Twins, because they always like setting a floor early in the offseason, was there a chance they went out and tried to sign an Andrews or a Iglesias with the process being
effectively
maybe
doing that?
I think this is even a better way of doing it because those guys aren't going to want to play utility.
That's true,
right? Yeah, those guys aren't going to want to. They're going to want. Well, okay, then I'm your new third baseman. Like if you sign Correa at that point, Iglesias is like, okay, so I guess I'm third base then. And now you've still got the option of keeping Miranda at third base, putting Farmer back into the utility role.
No, I think you're right. Like, I think if they had, well, maybe not, but I mean, we talked as an option, as a fallback option.
Right.
If you whiff on Correa or it gets, you're too big a nosebleed, going after Correa, going after Bogarts, going after Swanson, whatever, then it's reasonable to go, let's bring in Andrews 1 year, $8 million, or Jose Iglesias 1 year, $8 million, or something like that. This is right along those lines.
Well, and our point was that the Twins would often be one of the teams, and I think there might be some other teams that take a look at those high-end shortstops and go, well, let's just get the Iglesias or Andrus in place here and not worry about it.
Well, I mean, the difference between free agency is tricky even for the low-end guys or the mid-tier guys like Andrus and Iglesias because you don't have full control over it. Right. I mean, you can say to Elvis Andrus, hey, we view you as the floor setter. Maybe phrase this a little better. We view you as the floor setter. We'd like to get this wrapped up pretty quickly. How about 1 year, $8 million? And then if he says to you, his agent says, yeah, well, there's 4-star shortstops. We're going to wait to see how that market plays out because my guy might.
Yeah, there might be teams waiting to grab me.
So you can control it to some extent. You have options, but with Farmer, you can control that. You just bring him in not only this year but under control for next year too. Right, yeah. I mean, you could say he's our shortstop for the next year and a half or whatever. So I think there's a benefit there. Now you had to trade a decent reliever prospect to make that happen, and the monetary part, maybe he might end up. I'm curious what Anderson Iglesias end up getting, but I'm guessing $8 to $10 million or something like that. It could be less though. I mean, I think Iglesias
could be
got
6 to 8,
5 to 6 last year. So, but yeah, that's what people should be. Don't view Farmer. It's going to be tricky for people to avoid this, but don't view Farmer within the context of Correa or Bogarts or Swanson. View Farmer within the context of Andrus, Iglesias, Kiner Falefa, those type of guys. Right. Before we finish up with a bunch of stuff here, let's talk about our last sponsor, which is BetterHelp. We've talked about BetterHelp before. The idea behind BetterHelp is if you would like to speak to someone, you can get a real, fully accredited therapist.
Right.
And you can do it quickly within a few days. You don't have to jump through a million hoops. there aren't a million barriers for entry, and you can do it in a way however you're comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
Which is to say, if you want to just do a video chat with somebody from the comfort of your own couch, you can do that. Or if you say, I don't even really want to be on camera, I'll just rather talk to somebody on the phone, you can do that. Or if you're like me and you hate phone calls, you can do a live chat where you're just typing back and forth.
And if it doesn't click with the first therapist you can switch to another therapist. Like, it gives you the opportunity it removes all the obstacles, all the excuse making,
which is
that
key
you have
for this type of thing.
Right.
And you can learn more.
Oh, by the way, it's cheaper probably as well. Yeah, right.
You can learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Gleeman. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/Gleeman. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Okay. Let me just see what else we got here.
We got the uniforms.
Yeah. Well, you were there in person. Yes. Yeah, and everybody talked about it and everything.
Yeah,
they had Correa on FaceTime, right? I saw something about that.
They did. They have they had
with who,
Miranda had him on FaceTime. Yeah.
Yeah, they're buds.
Yeah.
Got the Puerto Rican
I think they're all buds. They have a group chat going constantly. They talked about Arise and Polanco, and
do you think the group chat was like Kyle Farmer? He's no you, buddy. Hey, but although somebody, our Reds reporter, C. Trent Rosencrantz, which is a great name, is our Reds for the Athletic long time. He was the president of BBWA last year. He told me and Dan, "You're gonna love Farmer. He was the media good guy for the Reds."
Oh, okay.
So if Correa leaves, he was the media good guy award winner for the Twins.
See?
They're replacing him with a media good guy.
Good.
For the Reds, for whatever that's worth. It's worth something to me. It's worth absolutely nothing to anyone else, other than the 6 people. But yeah, so it was at the Mall of America Rotunda. They set up like it looked like a bases stage. John was front row with Parker Hageman from Twins Daily. Like I said, our 2 greatest fashion plates we sent to the fashion show, front row. I watched from my hotel room in Las Vegas the live stream of it, and my first reaction was like, I had almost convinced myself that the change was going to be much very underwhelming, subtle,
right?
Because I just didn't expect the Twins to greatly change their brand, kind of, because it's not that long ago that they changed it. With adding the gold stuff to it.
They added a little gold.
That was within the last decade, basically. Yep. So I will say they did change it in a meaningful way. And I found it to be, look, I wear the same thing every day. I'm like Inspector Gadget. I wear sweatpants and a navy blue t-shirt to come do the podcast every day. So I'm not speaking on fashion. But I thought all of the 4 versions that they trotted out are at least, they're okay. I really liked the Twin Cities cream and blue. I love that one. Right. I like the hat.
Although the players said their favorite one was actually the gray.
With the pinstripe?
The new gray's pinstripe.
Right.
That was their favorite.
Which is going to get worn more than the Twin Cities.
And I'm pretty sure the focus groups rank them in exactly the same way as I do. And in fact, most of the people I talk to, because if you see who modeled each one, you can kind of guess which one was probably the most popular. The Twin Cities one was Buxton.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Gray was Arise. Arise got the gray, right? Polanco and Ryan.
Oh, Joe Ryan.
Joe Ryan had the blues, and then Miranda got stuck with the whites. and that's actually the whites ones are the only ones I'm kind of a little bit. I don't love the new Twins script. That they've got
red,
the
red cursive.
Yeah, the red cursive.
Yeah. I didn't love that either.
Yeah, that's the one thing that of the negatives I've had, that was probably the biggest negative.
Overall, it's a very clean look, which I tend to go for, and it's certainly it's a modern look, but it's not. We'll see, but how it ages, but it's not a modern look where you can think 10 years from now it's going to seem like you can go, oh, that must have been in 2022 they did that, and I think it's clean, but it's not. They're not trying to get too cute with it. I like that. But also that's just me talking about my own choice of style, I just like clean, not complicated.
I also think this. I think the uniforms and the focus on the uniforms and such was, from the Twins standpoint, they did the uniforms and got excitement about the uniforms, but that was all a disguise. What they really want to do is change the logo. They want to do that M with the star. Oh. Really, that brand changed. The M star, I think, is what everything was about. And then as part of it, they're like, yeah, let's also make sure we get some new uniforms in there so that we can generate some buzz around it. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to just throwing this M star at them. And I'll also tell you this. As I was leaving and saying thank you to people, the various baseball executives, yeah, thanks for having me, blah, 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 etc. All of them were like, what do you think the M star?
Yeah,
like that was I was like,
yeah.
I mean,
Did you give the Minnesota answer? It's interesting.
Here's what I said. I said, I like the star. I do. I'd like that star, adding that star there. I will tell you the comments that I got back on the social media I did on
Miami Marlins. M. That's the problem. Although they've changed it, but that's immediately what I saw because they rebranded like 6 years ago when they moved to Miami or when they became Miami instead of Florida. Now they've since changed it, but their launch had an almost identical font M without the star above it.
Right.
But it was the white M on a dark background, and it's like, yeah, that's very simple.
That is the overwhelming feedback I got is that people don't like that M because it's tying it to Miami Marlins, which is not a franchise you want to associate yourself with, right? And that was my sense as well. Was I'm not sure how I feel about the M, and I wasn't even really recognizing it as the Miami Marlins. It wasn't. That didn't jump out to me when I first saw it. But yeah, that's absolutely jumping out to most people. I think that's. You can do an M in a lot of ways, and that's a weird way to do it. That's so close to that.
So your point is interesting because I think, like you said, it was all sort of window dressing around that.
Right.
I think, obviously the jerseys are that's what they sell, and that's what people wear to the ballpark, and that's what people see. But it's a full brand reimaging. Not only, they sent out like a press release then 5 hours later for the Kyle Farmer trade.
Right.
And the press release is now designed, the picture they tweeted out, I should say, is now designed with that logo and the new fonts and the new lettering and the color scheme that they just revealed in the fashion show with the jerseys. So yes, the jerseys are themselves a thing, but the jerseys are representative of now what you're going to see on the scoreboard in terms of graphics. They're going to see what you see on lettering for everything from the Twins. So they're sort of incorporating that as the umbrella of what the franchise is going to look like. And that matters less to some kid who just wants a Rise jersey than the jersey itself. Yeah. But it's not just choosing a logo or choosing a jersey. It's choosing how you're going to put forth visually everything about the franchise for the next X number of years.
And the focal point of that is sort of the logo. That's the biggest change, and that's the one I think they were most worried about.
Yeah,
and I think
it's the one that got the least good reaction.
Well, they probably.
I don't think it got. Well, it's tricky. I don't think it's got a none of them are offensive.
No,
they're not bad.
Right.
I just think some are better than others. Some are. I also wonder. It's one thing to say, this is our number one, this is our number two, this is our number three, this is the alternate. But that will sort of solve itself, right? After the first year, you're going to see which jerseys sold the most. Right. You're going to see which logos on hats sold the most. Right. You're going to get feedback from fans over the course of a year. And so what you perceive on launch day as, well, this is our main one, and then this is our alternate one, and then 12 months later it might be, well, everyone loved the alternate one. That's right. It sold 3 times as many as the main one. Now all of a sudden,
which is, by the way, going to happen.
Right.
For
now
sure.
all of a sudden we're going TC caps with the TC script, and I'm a lifelong believer that the main logo should be the TC.
The TC as opposed to the M that was around in the 80s.
Because I have no problem with that. The M with the little, I don't know what you call that, like the diamond. Yeah, I mean, they sent me one to look at.
Yeah, I kind of like it.
It was waiting for me when I got.
No, I didn't get the head.
Becky's like, oh wow, it was like some big box, and I'm unwrapping. It was just a hat. I mean, it's nice. I'll give it to. We have a kid, a friend of the family. We give it to, but because I'm not gonna walk around. I can't wear Twins stuff anymore.
I suppose, yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah.
Stroll into the club bus wearing a Twins hat. Hey, but I just think.
I've got a story about that I got to tell you sometime.
Okay. I'm a big believer in the TC thing because I just think, first of all, 2 letters are more interesting than one. New York Yankees.
Right.
If it was just N,
Right.
instead of the interlocking NY, it'd be a lot less interesting.
Right.
I just think the TC, now they slightly tweaked it, but
Yes.
very little.
Very little, yeah.
I just think it's
I think they cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah, they made it
like
more modern,
I like it better.
sleeker.
Yeah.
I just think that's a good interlocking logo, and that's what I would want. And I think it's an interesting way to separate yourself. And I know people from outstate Minnesota and people in the Dakotas get all mad that you're not representing all of Twins territory. Right. Okay, but they've been wearing these hats for 30 years. I think it's a good way to separate.
And I think that is one of the reasons why they redid the logo.
Don't make it the main one. Yeah,
and I think that's why one of the reasons they redid the logo is they were trying to appeal to outstate. Hey, we are all Minnesota, etc.
Yeah, I'm a city boy. So, and similar to, let's say, elections, this is not political commentary, but similar to elections, land doesn't vote. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you want to appeal to everybody. You want Twins territory. You want some guy in South Dakota to love the Twins. You want some guy in War Road to, let's say, become completely obsessed about prospects and devote his entire life to writing about prospects. Hi, Seth. But ultimately, who are the people that buy stuff and go to games most are going to be people in Hennepin County or whatever. Right. So the Twin Cities component of that, I think, is, I don't know, I like it. It's interesting that the cream and blue
I also
is completely different.
Right.
It's much closer to the Royals almost, or the Dodgers almost, than it is anything represented in the other three versions of the jersey. Yeah. But I like that one the most. Yeah. That's the hat I would be wearing if I'm a Twins fan. I'm getting a TC hat,
right,
and I'm getting a cream and blue shirt is what I'm wearing probably.
Yeah, everybody I talk to feel the same way. That Twin Cities one is what everybody wants, right?
It's a good look.
I think there's actually a fair amount of people who don't recognize that can't understand why the Twins have a TC on them.
But I like that. That's what I mean.
Know what I mean?
It differentiates them from, I don't know, from any other team. Especially when you're named after the state and not a city.
Which was, I think the Twins were the first baseball team to be named after a state and not a city.
Is that right? Yeah, I guess.
Back in 61. And there was a reason for that.
Well, you're saying New York is named after New York City, not New York State.
That's right. Right.
That's interesting.
The reason for that is because at the time when the Twins came to Minnesota, St. Paul and Minneapolis had both had teams, and there was a tremendous rivalry between them, right? So if you ended up calling
you mean the Millers and the Saints?
Yes, tremendous rivalry between them. They played 3 times every summer on these back-to-back.
So they were trying to unite.
They were trying to unite two disparate fan bases, and the way they did that is by going with Minnesota, and then the TC were the Twins, and the logo was the two, Minneapolis and St. Paul. I think that was a significant concern when they first are we going to have a team that only Minneapolis cares about, and in fact they ended up playing in Bloomington, which was neither Minneapolis or St. Paul. You know what I mean?
The Bloomington Twins. That'd be a good.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, but here, let's not yes, that's all interesting, and the market research that went into this, and the brand testing that went. But let's not overthink this, right? What's the name of the GD team? The Twins. Why is it named the Twins? Well, because there's two cities, Minnie and Paul, Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Right.
Oh, well, maybe let's put Twin Cities on the hat. There we go. We stumbled across something. So I don't know. Why did I have to say GD? That's going to upset the people. Between me saying land doesn't vote and me blaspheming God, it's going to be. Let's see. A few other things. Tyler Anderson signed a 3-year, $39 million deal with the Angels. Okay. I had him ranked as the 8th best free agent starter. I think you had him similar range, third tier, I would say.
Yep.
That's almost precisely what that type of guy has gotten.
Right.
I remember Steven Matz, Alex Wood, those type of guys get somewhere between $10 and $15 million a year for 2 or 3 years. So that suggests that this offseason, the estimates that you're seeing could be fairly accurate in that range.
If anything, I'm surprised it wasn't a little higher just because he was one of the first ones to sign.
Yeah, although he got a qualifying offer. So,
okay.
So what happened with him? The Dodgers made him the qualifying offer.
Which, by the way, we should mention. When people talk about the Correa. Speaking of qualifying offers, when people talk about signing Correa, it's so important that he doesn't have a qualifying offer attached to him. Is he the only shortstop that doesn't have a qualifying offer attached to him? Did Xander Bogaerts have a?
Yes. He's the only of the 4, He's the only. Yeah, so you can only get the qualifying offer under this system once.
Right.
And the Twins The Astros made it to him last year, and the Twins paid the draft pick price to sign him. So now he's free and clear. Now, for a $300 million contract, does that matter? No, but it's a little tiebreaker sort of thing. But yeah, the qualifying offer this year, it's the average. What is it? The average of the top 100 salaries.
Yeah,
the previous year.
Like that, right?
So it rises a little each year. It's $19.65 million this year, and so that's a lot.
Yeah.
Martin Perez accepted it from the Red Sox.
Did he?
There was somebody else who accepted it too. Jock Peterson accepted it from the Giants.
Martin Perez ended up on the Red Sox last year?
On the Rangers, excuse me.
Okay.
Red Sox 2 years ago.
Okay, all right.
Good catch.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll change that in post. We'll get our editor.
Did that happen at the trade deadline?
No,
I just missed
you're right.
it?
2 years ago.
Okay, good.
Red
all right.
Sox.
Thanks.
Wasn't good for the Red Sox.
Okay.
Very good for the Rangers.
I'm surprised. I'm a little surprised Perez accepted that.
For $20 million? You'd take it too.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised.
If you had a 470 career ERA, do you remember Martin Perez on the Twins?
Well, that's why no, I know exactly. But that's why I'm like, this is maybe his one shot to get a multi-year deal.
Oh, that's true. But if the multi-year deal is 339,
I
then
guess.
120.
Yeah.
But Tyler Anderson also got a qualifying offer from the Dodgers, and not quite as his track record isn't quite as poor as Perez's prior to this year. But he's certainly
inconsistent.
He was a first-time All-Star this year. There's a notion that the Dodgers sort of fixed him, and can that improvement stay in place elsewhere? And he told the Dodgers and he told other teams, I'm signing today. I'm either taking this qualifying offer, or the Dodgers are going to make me a multi-year offer that I'm going to accept, or if those things aren't happening, I'm taking the best offer before the deadline. And the Angels gave him a 339 because he didn't want to become a free agent. He didn't want to be a free agent with the qualifying offer hanging over his head, having teams go, I'm a little skeptical of him.
I think that's something that people don't. I think people think, everybody wants to become a free agent. I think the vast majority of players, free agency is an unpleasant thing to go through.
And there's risk involved in it, too, especially for a mid-tier player.
That's right.
Or for Correa, as we saw last year. Correa thought he was going to get $300 million. He got $35 million.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what happened there. So, I don't know that really affects the Twins because, as we talked about,
I sure hope it doesn't affect the
lowest thing on their list of potential, additions is kind of a mid-rotation starter.
Right.
But it does, fill in a blank about the price of pitching. A couple other random things. James Rowson, former Twins hitting coach for the Bomba squad, who left after 2019 to become the bench coach of the Miami Marlins.
Right.
So he's been wearing that M on his head.
Yeah.
Got fired from the Marlins after 3 years and is now back in the American League Central with the Detroit Tigers as their assistant, their third in command hitting coach with the new Tigers organizational shift. James Rowson, in terms of impact versus amount people talk about him since he's left. Every time the Twins struggle offensively, it's, they got to bring back James Rowson. And every time I would go, have you all looked at what the Marlins have done the last 3 years? I think they had the worst.
He forgot how to coach.
That's what happened. Yeah, he just forgot how to coach.
Yep.
Well, now, not only did the Marlins fire him, but he couldn't even get a hitting coach job. I'm not degrading.
I'm surprised the Twins didn't try to bring him back, or maybe they did.
I mean, as an assistant, I guess they got the 2 hitting coaches already. I don't know. It's a little tricky, but yeah. So he's back in the Central with the Tigers. The Tigers. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit next week because we're going to go over the payroll situations of the other Central teams.
Right.
The Tigers have a chance to get pretty interesting here because they have some young talent. They have some high draft pick recent guys, although some of them aren't looking that great, like Torkelson. They have a good manager in A.J. Hinch who they've decided to retain, but they cleared house in the front office, which has been long overdue, and they brought in the Giants' assistant GM, Scott Harris, who has a very good reputation as a new school. Going to expand the analytics department. They're going to, much like the Twins were 7 years ago, the Tigers have been perceived as one of the older school, like slowest adopting, data, tech, that sort of thing. That's not going to be the case anymore. Now, as we also saw with the Twins, that doesn't necessarily guarantee success is forthcoming. But I do think the days of going, the Tigers and the Royals are kind of lagging behind everyone else in terms of brain power or...
Yeah, the question is sort of what are they going to be doing? Or, is he going to take a year to kind of figure out the organization and stuff?
Okay, so let's see. They're also our frequent place for podcasting from years past. Stella's is closing.
I know. I think some people went there last night. We couldn't make it.
Yeah. We couldn't either. We were flying back from Vegas. We were going to go. Our favorite bartender,
We got
Farrah.
we got 1 week, right? One week
Saturday
left?
night. But it was Farrah, who's the best bartender I've ever been served by. That was her last night. She used to always work Sunday nights. But we did a lot of podcasts at Stella's, mostly because I was always at Stella's. So if John was like, we should do a podcast, and I'm like, come on down, buddy.
Perfect.
I'm on the third from the last spot on the lower bar.
Yeah.
I'm drunk, but we can go. Let's do it.
You can find some. You can go back to the archives and find some stuff.
Oh, yeah.
for sure.
My favorite, one time there was one, I don't know what episode, you guys have to find it, where I was there drinking with Becky was there when we first started to go out. Because I would make her go there all the time. That's where our first date was. That's where I met her.
Yeah.
Even before. Your wife was there the night I met her. You weren't there. It was Wisconsin versus Arizona Elite 8 game, I want to say, like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's one episode where she will not come on the podcast. I've been trying to get her to come on the podcast. Whereas Chrissy will occasionally yell things into the microphone. But Becky's like deathly afraid of being recorded or anything. But she was drunk enough, and they were probably Chrissy or maybe Dana or Lindsay or whoever were at the bar drinking with her, and we were on like a side table recording a podcast. And she like got up to go to the bathroom, and as she was walking by, she like slaps my butt and says something, but I'm not going to say filthy, but something, lewd was fun to hear.
Okay.
And I think I was like, oh, wow, she just said blah, blah, blah. And all the blood drained out of her face. And she was like, what? Anyway, that was the last time she was on microphone. That's when she realized it's all fair game when the microphones are on. But anyway, yeah, we just came back from Vegas. It's the first time I haven't been to Vegas in years and years, but it was the first time I've been to Vegas with I was going to say girlfriend. Let's call her significant other.
Right.
And it was fun. I know you and Chrissy have gone many times, but like it's a whole different ball game going with a girlfriend or a wife, obviously, than going with a bunch of buddies or a group of people, or even I went with my dad one time when I was much younger. Like it's just a whole different experience, obviously. I hope people out there have a significant other whose time and presence they actually enjoy. The
vast
helps
majority
too.
of the time that we've gone there, we've gone with like a bigger group. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you go with the power trip.
Or we like friends from high school or something like that.
Which that's fun too, which is what I've done in the past.
Yeah, I like that mix. We've been there a couple times where it was just the two of us, and that's fun as well.
It's fun.
But it is a very
much different vibe. We went to a lot of dinners.
Right.
We went to Cirque du Soleil show, which was really good. I don't know. Here's my recommendations from Vegas.
Okay,
I'll give them because I was looking for these before we booked it. We stayed at the Bellagio. I would not stay at the Bellagio again. The Bellagio itself, the casino floor, and we went to a Cirque show in the theater. It was great, and that's where I had stayed the last time I was there. The room sucked.
Huh.
And
I've not had that experience at the Bellagio. I've liked the Bellagio rooms.
The room is very expensive. I mean, they're all very expensive, but it was very expensive. And we got there, and like the air conditioning didn't work. The TV was on the fritz. Here's the thing that bothered me the most, and this is pathetic to say this, but they got 1-ply toilet paper in like a $500 a night hotel room. So that's one of the things you could fix that for $1 a week.
That's interesting.
Have no one ever
interesting you say that because at the hotel we were at in Philadelphia, they actually have a sign up in the bathroom saying there's a reason why we have 1-ply toilet paper. It's because it virtually eliminates any clogged toilets, etc.
Okay,
right? And
okay.
And as a result, and this is we hope you understand.
I thought it was because we're cheap.
No, they're like
the reason we have
basically they're like you are much less likely to clog up the toilet.
All right,
with 1-ply toilet. Maybe they just said, well, Gleeman's coming.
We better be prepared for Gleeman.
Let's make sure we get 1-ply in that room.
Well, that's an interesting theory. I would argue. Get a great toilet then. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Get an uncloggable $1 billion toilet. You're charging an arm and a leg for this stuff. But the casino floor, like the actual gambling experience there was really good. And the theater that we saw the Cirque show, which was called O, which is like a water show. I didn't know what to expect from I'm not like it's like half opera, half circus sort of. And that's not my vibe. I don't know what my vibe is, but that's not it. And I was blown away. Like it's incredible. And It's in this huge, like 1,000+ seat theater in the Bellagio. It's like it's between like the sports book and the buffet. Like it's just you walk in and you're like, oh, we were just playing video poker, and then we walk in. Oh, it's 1,000-foot seat theater with 8 stories tall, and they do
a nice job of hiding those enormous theaters.
Incredible.
Don't they? Yeah.
And so that part of the Bellagio was great. I would not spend money to stay in the room there, but also our approach, which is how this differs going with a girlfriend than going by myself. My approach by myself is, I've been sitting at this poker table for 15 hours now. Let me go place a sports bet and then go to the buffet.
Yeah.
That's my approach. We went to
have some long darts.
Yeah. Yeah. We went to 5 different casinos, spent like a night at each one walking, or a day at each one walking around. We went to dinner at a bunch of different, so that's much different. But if that's your approach, which I think was probably a better approach, than just, she kept going.
That's debatable.
She kept going, why aren't you going to play poker? Like, you love poker. Why don't you go to the Aria or to the Bellagio? And I'm like, yeah, but you can't. Like, poker's not like a slot machine or even like blackjack. You can't play poker for 20 minutes.
No.
It takes you 20 minutes to get a seat. And then, it's got to go. You got to spend
you
5 hours.
You don't know what you're asking.
Right.
Right.
Well, and she finally said, so I did a lot of, like, watching her gamble and like playing alongside her, like blackjack and stuff.
Sure.
Because she's not a degenerate gambler. Like, and so, but we were betting much less than I, left to my own devices, would be betting.
Yes.
And she finally, like the 4th day, she said, I think I get what you're doing. And I'm like, oh. She said, you're stopping yourself from opening the door fully. Because if you open the door fully, and that's right, because like we made a $25 bet on the Sixers-Wolves game, right? Because she wanted to place her first bet, on a sports book, and she, like, I'm like, oh, we won. She won by half a point.
Yeah,
she took the 76ers. It's funny, and she was so excited, and that was fun. And then she's like, oh, how much would you have bet on that? And I'm like, I mean, I've never placed a $25 bet in my life. And she's like, oh, that's not that much. And I'm like, no, I mean, I would have bet $200 on it. Right. And so she's like, I get what you're trying to do. But to me, that was more fun. I mean, it's a different kind of fun.
Sure.
There's a fun in just sinking into your own degeneracy, but there's also a fun of like, we just kind of walked around and hit. And also, I mean, we went a lot for like the dinners and so we went to. Go ahead.
I know I have a lot of friends I have some friends who get turned off by who get turned off by gambling. Like they just they won't go to Vegas because they're like, I don't want to gamble. And I'm like,
well, that's why we haven't gone, because she kept saying, because she knows I like poker, I like to bet on stuff. Right. She kept saying, we got to go to Vegas together. And I kept saying for years, I was like, what you envision as me in Vegas is not the reality. I'm not fun to be around in Vegas because I'm not. It won't even look like I'm personally having fun. Right. But because my brain is a screwed up brain, I am having fun.
Right, exactly.
But I was able to compartmentalize that and sort of have fun through her.
And the people I know who generally went to Vegas at some point in their youth, right? And their friends were gambling like crazy, and they either gambled like crazy and lost, or didn't really enjoy gambling, or don't enjoy losing. And then it's just, but my point is, like, you're at a different point in your life now. And Vegas is not just like our number one goal at Vegas was always, don't be broke by 10:30. Find other stuff to do until 10:30 p.m. because at 10:30 p.m. all you can do is drink and gamble. Right? There are no shows to go to anymore. There are no restaurants to go to anymore. Right? And we talk about, the easiest way to lose money slowly in Vegas is to bet sports.
Yeah,
because then you watch a game for 3 hours and you're either up $40 or you're down $40.
Right.
Something
That's
like
what
that.
I would also know. Like the first time I went there, I was 21 and we stayed at the MGM.
Right.
And at the time, I don't know what it is now. We didn't go back there, but they had a sports book. It was decent size. It had a Krispy Kreme and a deli in the sports book.
Yeah.
So I would literally just sit there all day. I'd put 3 or 4 different $100 bets.
Right.
I'd order turkey sandwiches and Krispy Kremes and vodka or Jack Cokes, whatever. It was great. And every time we would walk by a sports book, she goes, well, do you want to go into the sports book? And I want to be like, well, if I we can place a bet. Are we going to sit here for 3 hours and watch a college football game? I was like, you would never want to do that at home. She's like, we can do that. But I didn't. But yeah, you're right. Like,
but now there's just so much more stuff to do in Vegas, like all the shows and all the restaurants and all the other stuff.
I mean, I was blown away because it's been like 10 years since I went.
Right. Now it's super expensive.
Well, I was blown away by that. I'm just cheap now. But I was like, when I went 10 years ago, and also stayed at the Bellagio last time. That was when I was with the NBC. It was for winter meetings. At the time, the talking point at the time was, the restaurant situation is so much improved. But now I think back, and it was compared to 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
But it was
Well,
all
just
steakhouses and buffets,
Yeah, right.
which obviously they still have that. We had breakfast at a buffet. It was pretty good. But now it's celebrity chefs.
Right.
And like we went to Jose Andres' restaurant, or we went, Gordon Ramsay's got 20 restaurants.
Yes, right.
If you're a Top Chef fan like we are, there's a bunch of Top Chef people who have fans. Like we got off the plane, and our first stop after we checked in was to go to the Wynn, because the Wynn is home to a place called Wing Li, which is the first Michelin-starred Chinese restaurant in North America.
Okay.
Well, obviously. I had to go that, and it turns out it was really good. But that's our sort of daily thing was, let's get our dinner reservation at like 8.
Right.
And then let's mess around,
Right.
walk around, do whatever, walk around, go to different places, grab lunch or something. All with the idea of, we got somewhere to be at 8.
8 o'clock, yeah.
Because you can only get into so much weirdness before that.
Yep.
Then you have dinner, 8 to something, you maybe have a drink, whatever it is. Then it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it's like you said, okay, now we haven't gone broke today.
Right,
Now let's go to the blackjack table, or now let's do whatever. So yeah, here's what I would recommend. Wing Li, which is at the Wynn, I want to say. Man, I can't even remember. At the Wynn or the Aria? Win.
Yeah, they're basically the same.
Yeah. And then the last night we went to Jose Andres' place called China Poblano, which was a Mexican-Chinese mixture, basically, which also is my 2 favorite.
Right.
And that was really good. That was at the Cosmopolitan, which I liked a lot. Right. I like the Cosmopolitan the best. The Cirque du Soleil show, which is I would highly recommend.
Yeah.
Even if you perceive yourself as like me, as someone who's not into that sort of thing, I was blown away by it. One of the best things I've ever seen. Okay. And then we also went to the America's largest dispensary, which is called Planet 13, which was I didn't realize, because Minnesota's not fully legal for pot. Like I had heard, like Becky goes on a bunch of business trips to Colorado or whatever, and they have so many places that are almost like Apple stores for pot, where it's just these clean lines and customer service, and they got little kiosks and everything, and I'm like, but then you walk into this place and it's like 100,000 square feet.
Right. It's like a superstar.
Chandeliers and
this is
it was amazing.
When the power trip goes, Zach Alvarez leads like a tour.
Oh yeah.
To there, he just
that's what I would be.
Like a bus of people all go to Planet 13.
It's amazing, and also it's funny that they're starting to get like celebrity product.
Right.
Like Lil Wayne has his own vape.
Of course.
Mike Tyson has gummies that are shaped like ears with a bite in them.
Yes, I know.
And there was
he and Holyfield together. That's a business partnership.
There was one other one too, and I'm like, this would just be amazing. So those are my recommendations. If you are someone who needs good toilet paper, do not stay at the Bellagio. I now have like hundreds of dollars in World Cup futures. Which means we're going to have to go back to Cashman.
Yes.
I somehow am now rooting for like France because she put money on France. What happened was we were in, because they have kiosks now, which changes the sports betting game.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right.
You can just sit there all day and place bets.
Right.
And so she, in line for the kiosk, she texted our soccer aficionado, Dana Wessel, and said, who's going to win the World Cup? And he said, France, Argentina, or Brazil. And France had the highest odds. So now apparently we have millions of dollars riding on France, which I would never root for France in anything in my entire life. Even Rudy Gobert, I have a hard time rooting for, but apparently that. Okay, that's probably it. There was
thank you to our
little bit of everything on that show.
Thank you to our sponsors, Storyworth and HelloFresh and BetterHelp and Soda Stick and Stamps.
We probably will not be back for the rest of the week, although certainly if the Twins make a major move, we'll have something. But it is Thanksgiving week. Yeah. So probably we'll talk to you next Sunday/Monday type of thing.
I'm thinking so.
Are you in town?
I'm in town. Yep.
Okay.
I'm in town. My son's in town. Yep.
Look at the party.
It's going to be fun.
You make him stay here with you again, or does he get to go to a hotel? That's the next step in the Riggs evolution. Y'all are too loud. I can't get any sleep. Exactly. Let me stay at a hotel.
And we'll be like, okay, no problem.
Oh, that's true. Or better, you guys go stay at the hotel. He can have the apartment or the condo. All right. Thank you to everyone Also go play the Game of Thrones slot machine.
Is that's the one that hit for you?
Yeah, that was good. I could easily be one of those people who just sits at a slot machine for like 15 hours and just
really,
yeah, because they'll bring you drinks.
Well, that's true.
They bring you drinks and you can vape in the thing.
Yeah, we do
great.
that. We do.
What more could a guy want?
I mean, listen, we do basically the same thing at a roulette table.
Yeah, we didn't play roulette. I tried to get her to play craps.
Oh,
but it's very overwhelming if you've. I mean, I've played it occasionally. It's still kind of overwhelming.
Right.
But she doesn't know. Like, it's very. It feels like there's a lot of pressure to make good decisions or to act quickly.
I know.
Because people are wearing suits.
Well, I mean, there's also all the action between, but basic craps is fairly straightforward.
I mean, you can make it as easy as yes, no. Basically, you're
That's
just betting
exactly
on yes or no.
That's right.
So we tried to do that, but yeah, blackjack I got her into, but a little poker, video poker.
Did you play any Pai Gow?
No. Did you know? I was walking by. I think it was in the.
First of all, the Pai Gow they've changed the rules in Pai Gow through Vegas, so
I've never played Pai Gow.
It used
in
to
my
be
life.
the best way to lose money slowly.
But is that different than 3-card poker?
Yeah.
Okay. I had to do a double take. We were walking. I think it was in the Cosmo, but I'm not sure. They have War that you can play.
I know.
I thought it was a joke.
No, they've got War.
What's that?
And people play it. There are people at that table.
For money tiddlywinks? Like, what are we playing here? War. And I was like, you want to play War? You definitely know how to play War. And I was like, I guess, yeah. It's just basically like in between.
Right.
Or you're playing like. Anyway, all right.
Talk to you next Monday, most likely.
Yeah, goodbye.
Bye.